Hey, this is Zeklog the Great. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. The borrower is slave to the lender. Now, some people might think this is metaphorical. I don't think so. I think this is quite literal. We in the West don't have slaves today, in the old sense. Muslims are keeping the tradition strong, though, eh? 3 cheers for multiculturalism. But, as in late imperial Rome, a great majority of the residents of our country are de facto slaves. This will require a little abstract thinking to explain, though, so please stick with me. The first thing we have to talk about is money. What is money? What does it mean? Unless you're an economist or a philosopher, you've probably not spent much time thinking about this. What do we do with money? We buy goods and services. That is, we exchange our money for someone else's work or for the product of someone else's work. How do we earn money? Well, there is investment, which these days is growing increasingly shady and corrupt. But for most of us, we earn money by working for someone else. So, here's the cycle. Alan works for Bob. Bob gives Alan money. Alan takes this money and hands it to Carl to buy something that Carl worked to produce. Yes, there are many, many more steps in a real economy. It's a simplified model. So, what is the money for? Money is a way to store up labor. Money is to labor as a battery is to electricity. It is a convenient way to store up the labor we have done and regain it in a more useful form at a later date. So if money is a way to store up labor, what are you actually doing when you borrow money from someone else? You are promising to work for them in the future in order to get some benefit now. That is, you are signing your future freedom away for a current gain. Practically speaking, you are turning yourself into an indentured servant, which is a fine shade of difference away from a slave. Now, you might say, I'm not obligated to work for the banker. I can go wherever I please and do the work I want. Yes, but until that debt is paid, the product of your labor is not your own. They may permit you to keep much of it, but they own your labor. Among things most people don't know, as a matter of practice, most slaves were allowed to keep much of what they produced. And depending on time, place, and the local laws, slaves were often allowed to save up and buy their own freedom. That a slave actually doing so was the exception rather than the rule does not change the nature of the system. And yes, you are quite free to move from one employer to another, from one career field to another, from one city to another. But you are not free to walk away from that debt. Until that is paid to the penny, you owe the lender your work. What do they care where that work is actually done? You are working for them and you are not free to do otherwise. Frankly, it's much more convenient for the slave master this way. He doesn't have to bother housing you, managing and directing you, preventing you from running away. He just reaps the reward of your labor because you signed your freedom over to him. And with compounding interest and easy credit, many people today will be in debt, in slavery, until the day they die. And they don't even know it. The borrower is slave to the lender. We like to brag about how free we are, but we are a nation of slaves. We voluntarily put these chains on ourselves in exchange for pretty baubles. But we are a nation of slaves nonetheless. God save us.